This is a production of WGBH2 Boston.
Last week, the governor said the Ethics Commission should look into certain of Senator Brian Joyce's activities. Tonight on Greater Boston, Joyce is here to respond in his first TV interview just hours after some other complaints against him were resolved. Then, all politics is loco. Our caucus takes up Donald Trump's embrace by Sarah Palin, a match made in reality TV heaven. Will it help? We'll also talk about Bernie Sanders' massive lead in New Hampshire, according to the latest poll. Could he actually win? And then a tale of two cities, Boston and Chicago. We begin with dirty laundry in politics, literally. You first heard the Globe's report here on Greater Boston about the Randolph dry cleaner who says State Senator Brian Joyce was getting free services there, not just for himself, but for his family, sometimes his aides, for more than a decade. Last week on Boston Public Radio, Governor Charlie Baker weighed in.
In a situation like this where you have a private citizen speaking so forthrightly about a continuing pattern with respect to this type of activity, I think this is the sort of thing the Ethics Commission should take a really hard look at. There's enough there to justify a review, absolutely.
This is not the first time Joyce has faced ethics and campaign finance charges, some of which were resolved today. Joining me now for his first TV interview on the subject is State Senator Brian Joyce. Senator, I really appreciate your being here. You don't deny that you got thousands of dollars in free dry cleaning services. You contend nothing improper was done, correct? Why?
I unequivocally deny.
Why?
Because I was a uncompensated attorney and got as a token payment for legal services worth far more than any dry cleaning, some dry cleaning. And, you know, Jim, some of these suggestions go back to 1997. And, you know, I'd challenge you to find your dry cleaning receipt from 1997. We found one from 98. It was from a different dry cleaner. So let me just, can I just have an opportunity, because this has been going on a long time, to just speak about, to say today's decisions. And
we're going to get to them in a second. I want to do the dry cleaning, then we'll get to today's decisions. You say you were uncompensated. He paid you at least $140,000 on one case, didn't he?
Absolutely not true.
Didn't pay you.
So the article contained a lot of information that I'm not able to speak about because of the attorney-client privilege.
You were never compensated.
The attorney-client privilege prevents me from being entirely forthcoming about issues, and the gentleman
including compensation. You just said
the gentleman refused to release me from that attorney-client privilege.
But Senator, you just said you weren't compensated.
Please give me a chance. What the article suggested, I think it was in paragraph 11, the one invoice that the Globe got their hands on showed some $12,500 in free legal services. That's a lot of dry cleaning.
So you were never compensated by this client?
I believe that article suggested he made a $5,000 payment for legal services that lasted over a decade and spanned many
That's
articles.
That's the only compensation?
There was some compensation paid by insurance companies that we went after on his behalf, including compensation that was paid to the client. And I'll tell you, in 2008, the client could not possibly have been happier with the results.
But Brian, Joyce, if I can be clear, you started representing him, according to the Globe story, in 2003. He contends he was doing dry cleaning for you for nothing 6 years earlier. So it couldn't have been a quid pro quo for legal services then, could it?
So what I had responded to the Globe was that we did not have records that predated 2003. And again, I would challenge you to produce some records pre-2003.
So you said you did represent him prior to 2003, or you didn't get free dry cleaning? I just want to be clear, Senator.
What I said was I was unable to speak to the issues that I represented this gentleman on without a release of the attorney-client privilege, which he... So
you think he's lying about you, by the way? What's his agenda?
Let me just put it in context.
Yeah.
Somebody's making accusations against you, and you're not able to respond, because legally and ethically, I'm bound by this attorney-client privilege. We asked him to release us. He didn't.
Is he lying about you?
So... Let me suggest that there's some concern, apparently, by a decision of another attorney in a previous law firm, which I think was the right decision. I think there's some concern of my refusal to intercede on his behalf with the DEP.
So you think he has an axe to grind?
I do.
Do you agree with the governor that either the Ethics Commission or some appropriate body should look into this?
Look, I've had the Ethics Commission look at another matter. We're
going to get to that in a second, but how about this matter?
I'm sure they'll take a look at it.
And you're okay with that?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
You mentioned that on a couple of matters they were resolved today. Office of Campaign and Political Finance resolved at least one that had been pretty high profile. We discussed here before. You had used more than $3,000 in campaign funds to pay for part of a graduation party for your son. What was the disposition for this thing today?
So the law is quite clear in this, that a political candidate is able to use money for the enhancement of his or her political future. So we've held parties at our house in the past. We invite several hundred people. It was tied to, say, on one occasion, fundraising for the local library. In this one instance, it was tied to a graduation party. We were pretty careful. We had segregated the expenses that were personal in nature, paid for them personally. We relied on a prior decision of the Office of Campaign Political Finance. We also subsequently sought an opinion from a campaign finance expert, the former House counsel, who said it was all completely, but the optics looked bad. So when the state Republican Party made a complaint, I said, look, why don't I just make a donation to charity?
Which is what the resolution
is. But
you agree it looks really bad, does it not, that you're using, I'm using your words, does it not, even if it's technically on the up and up?
My words are that I did not violate any campaign finance laws. I have not done anything wrong. And in order to resolve this amicably, I said, look, I'll just donate the money to charity. And they said, fine.
But you agree it doesn't look good?
Absolutely.
One other issue was resolved today. The State Ethics Commission, on this issue, $10,000 or $11,000 in sunglasses you received. They said today, we are satisfied this matter does not require further action on our part, so it's over. But originally, you did get $10,000 plus in sunglasses for nothing. Is that not correct? And only after the Globe called you paid $3,000? Is that accurate or no?
I'm going to ask you, please, to give me an opportunity.
Of course.
Here. That could not possibly be more incorrect.
How so?
So I visited a business in my district in November, I believe it was, of 2014. And at that time, as we do every year, we buy gifts for our colleagues representative of our district. And so I suggested I would buy sunglasses from a business in my district. The year before, I bought pens from a business in my district. The gentleman asked me how much I wanted to spend. I said, I don't know, $50. The glasses came with an invoice. I immediately had a call suggesting that it was illegal for me to give gifts to my colleagues, which I knew that to not be the case. And then there was a suggestion that somehow I was not paying the right amount. I immediately got on the phone with the owner of the business and said, look, I didn't ask for any break. And he said, I know that. And I had on the phone with me, by the way, the former general counsel of the State Ethics Commission. And I said, well, where did you come up with this price for these glasses? They could have been plastic for all I cared. And the gentleman said, I think that was a fair price. And the person on the phone with me said, what's your published price? He said $74.50. And that's exactly what I paid. I paid exactly $74.50 for each of the 46 pair of sunglasses.
Was that before or after the Globe contacted you about that?
As I just said, it was after. It was. I visited the place. I picked up the glasses. I had the invoice. We pay on a net 30 basis. There was never any intention to get. I mean, any suggestion, Jim, that I was looking to get free sunglasses is just simply false. Any suggestion that these were $11,000, you're comparing. There was a comparison, I think, to Ray-Ban sunglasses. Mm-hmm. These weren't Ray-Ban sunglasses. Let me just please make a point.
Sure.
So there were two allegations made. One was that somehow I had got some inappropriate benefit from a business in my district. That was made on January 30th.
Which is this?
This is the sunglass company.
Okay.
That was made on January 30th, 2015. In the year that has elapsed, that story ran in print over 50 times. It ran electronically in social media over 500 times.
But it was resolved today.
And it was resolved, and let's be clear, it was resolved. The State Ethics Commission did a thorough investigation and found nothing wrong.
Got it.
But it's hard for me to get, I can't compete with the media, but to get that word out. Well,
you could have competed. You chose not to speak to the reporter from the Boston Globe when these stories were running. You could have given your side of it then, could you not?
Jim, I did almost nothing else. We've been responding to questions for the past 13 months, day in and day out. Almost nothing else. It is. But these stories are they've hurt me personally, professionally, and politically. I get that. But it also hurts, my family reads this stuff. My friends, my father, my children, my wife, my constituents, my clients. So the point I want to make is after 550 plus stories, the Ethics Commission determined there's nothing there. And please, I want to make that clear.
Well, I've just read it. I read it verbatim. One last thing. Speaking of Ethics Commission, my understanding is there is a matter pending relating to you. Is the company Energize? Is that how you pronounce it? This is a firm you represent. You supported a bill in the legislature that was promoted by them without publicly disclosing that they were your client in your law firm. Is that accurate so far?
No.
You didn't disclose? You did disclose it?
So let me just say that I acted entirely appropriately, and there'll be a determination coming out on that, I'm sure.
Did you disclose that they were your client as well as when you were filing their bill in the legislature?
The first part of your question was wrong, that I supported a bill that was for their benefit.
You
That's
didn't?
Absolutely not true.
They would receive no benefit from
Correct.
this firm. How about the fact that it's contended you approached state regulators on their behalf, which is clearly in violation of law, if it's true? Did you do that?
Not clearly in violation of law.
Lawmakers cannot contact state officials on behalf of private clients for pay. Did you contact the state regulators on behalf of that client?
So there's two issues there. For compensation, no. In ministerial matters are allowed, yes.
And that's all you're saying?
Yes.
You did. Just a couple of quick things. If you did nothing wrong, and that's essentially what you've said here for 10 minutes, Senator Joyce, why
But it's not just what I said. It's what the State Ethics Commission
Well, there's
said,
still things that are
and it's
pending.
what the Office of Campaign Political Finance said.
The cleaning thing is pending. The Energize thing is pending. We talked about the two things that were resolved. But, Senator, if you did nothing wrong, why did you agree to surrender to leadership positions in the Senate?
So there was a story and a story and a story and a story. So I didn't want to be a distraction at all. And so there was a suggestion on the pages of the Globe, why doesn't he step aside? So I stepped aside.
You did it because the Globe suggested it.
Basically, yes.
What if your colleagues said to you, where they think based on the current state of affairs, whether you consider it rational or not, that they'd like you to step down totally or resign? What would you do?
I don't think that's going to happen, Jim.
What if it did?
I think it's, it's a little bit unfair for you to suppose, A, that there's something there when the first two rulings that have come out have shown that I did nothing wrong.
But you agree there is a serious appearance of impropriety, at least on the first issue we discussed with your kid's graduation party, no? And couldn't you say the same thing about the sunglasses issue? Even with your description to a constituent, it doesn't look kosher?
I mean, portrayed in the manner it was and repeated some 550 times, it appears not to be kosher. But, look, I do the best I can. I'm not perfect. I work very hard on behalf of my constituents. I work very hard on behalf of my clients. This has been brutal on my family, and for that I'm incredibly sorry. I know that we have to avoid even the appearance of impropriety, and I do that best I can, and I know I can improve upon that. But the two accusations that have been determined by the appropriate bodies have been determined to be false, and that I did nothing wrong.
Senator Joyce, I really appreciate your time, and thank you very much for coming here. Senator Brian Joyce. Later, I'll speak to how Boston gets it right and Chicago could not get it more wrong. But first, it feels like we first started talking about election 2016 in 1916. But this week, the pace is quickening. And to quote Sarah Palin, there's no more pussyfooting around. Yes, with 12 days to go until the Iowa caucuses and 20 till first in the nation, New Hampshire, the former Alaska governor and Tea Party darling has picked her candidate. He is Donald J. Trump. She made the announcement yesterday in Iowa, and it was quite the speech.
I am here because, like you, I know that it is now or never. I'm in it to win it. Doggone right we're angry, justifiably so. Yes. They stomp on our neck, and then they tell us, just chill. Okay, just relax. Well, look, we are mad, and we've been had. They need to get used to it. This election is more than just your basic ABCs. You ready for a commander-in-chief who will let our warriors do their job and go kick ISIS ass? Things things are going to change under President Trump.
Now, on the other side of the race, it's been a tough 24 hours for Hillary Clinton. A new CNN poll has her 27 points behind Bernie Sanders in New Hampshire. On top of that, the latest report on Clinton's emails, claiming some found in her private server, were designated at a higher classification level, even than top secret, whatever the level that is. And then there's a pretty tough New York Times article out today, which I'll get into a little later. Joining me now to discuss all that's bubbling up and in some cases exploding in this race are Shannon O'Brien. Shannon is a former state treasurer, Democratic candidate for governor, and a Hillary Clinton supporter. Great to see you, Shannon. And Charlie Chippio is a senior fellow at the conservative-leaning Pioneer Institute, served in the Romney administration, and is still shopping around among the candidates. Charlie, it's great to see you, too. So, as wacky as this thing was, and I don't even mean that disrespectfully, it was wacky. Does this not help Donald Trump with the Tea Partiers, the hard right? It's got to help, doesn't it, Shannon?
I think it helps completely. By the way, I heart her jacket. I love her jacket. I want it. And I think it helps.
Someone texted me today that it was Liberace's before.
I've seen her, but I've seen her. That jacket, this is not the first time that's been...
It moves independently of her.
And it moves right. But anyway, I think that it helps him tremendously with some of the conservatives, the Tea Party people.
In primary season. Now, we can debate. I mean, maybe she's going to be shoved aside, assuming he makes it to the final.
Right.
But in the primary time, it is a huge lift, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think in certain states, I don't know that it'll make a big difference necessarily in New Hampshire, but I think it's a big deal in Iowa, where there's a real
Tea Party evangelicals,
Tea Party
that sort of
evangelical, that group, absolutely.
Also, and it's not Ted Cruz, which is also pretty serious. It's not only an endorsement of Trump, but a rejection, I guess you would say, of the guy who is leading in some polls.
That's right.
Out there,
that's right. No, I think in certain places it makes a big difference.
So if that's done, well, that's pretty easy. Well, let's move on to another endorsement. This one was for Ted Cruz. Here it is.
I've looked at the candidates. Ted Cruz is my man. He fits the bill. He's got me. He loves us. He's the man for the job, and he will go duck hunting.
Obviously, that's the Duck Commander from Duck Dynasty. And if you weren't clear, that face on the right there is with face paint. That, of course, is Ted Cruz with a borrowed shotgun kind of thing.
Varmints.
What's that?
He's hunting varmints.
You know, my first reaction today was Dukakis in a tank, part 2. However, we got a lot of email today saying guns matter a lot. Robertson, Duck Commander, matters a lot. And this is a big endorsement, too, at least in Iowa. You don't buy it.
You know, maybe it is. I mean, I'm not in or of that world, you know, and so much of what I've seen in the last couple of months has completely astounded me that I'm sort of losing any faith in my own instincts.
But one thing you do understand is guns are a huge issue.
Understand.
Second Amendment is a huge issue, and that's what this is all. It's not about duck hunting. It's about the fact I'm going to stand by your side on the Second Amendment. That matters, doesn't it?
I think it does. I mean, I think that both the Sarah Palin issue is going to help Donald Trump because he has had questionable bona fides with the real conservatives. You know, he's
including some talk radio people who aren't crazy about him but love Sarah Palin. Yeah.
But you know, he has completely flipped his position, at least as a private citizen, on a number of different issues, including supporting Hillary Clinton.
Yes.
So I think that that both the duck guy helps Cruz as much as I don't know what his name is, but anyway. But I love the makeup. I thought that was
well, you can borrow the makeup and run the jacket.
Makeup, you know.
Absolutely.
So Iowa 12 days away, both did pretty well with their endorsements. Let's move to the Democratic side and repeat, you were a Hillary Clinton supporter. A couple of days ago, there was a poll that had Bernie Sanders only up 6 points. So the CNN poll's an outlier, but it's not some wacko group. It's CNN. 27 points. The articles in places like the Times, Globe, elsewhere say there's fear in the Clinton camp. They grossly undersold this guy's candidacy. They didn't respond early enough. Are those fears real? Should they be real?
I think they're real. I think that Bernie Sanders has done a very good job of hitting on some issues that a lot, especially in the sort of left wing of the party, really cares about. Wall Street, income inequality. That has been his mantra time and time again. Even when they're asking him different questions on the debate stage, he heads back in that direction, and that's a powerful message for a significant chunk of the progressive part of the party.
What do you make of the fact about a week ago that Joe Biden, who's pretty popular with those same people, praised Bernie Sanders for exactly what you just mentioned, and then basically said, and I'm paraphrasing, and Hillary Clinton's sort of late to the fair, but I'm glad she's there. That's pretty serious slap, is it not?
I think it's a slap, but I also think that Joe probably really did want to run for president and maybe thought that he got in too late, thought he would be the credible alternative to Hillary Clinton, and, you know, for his own personal, you know, tragedy was not able to get something like that off the ground. So maybe there's a, you know, something going on.
Can Sanders win? If Sanders wins Iowa, and it's practically neck and neck, he's moving up a little into a tie, she's moving down a little. He's got either a small lead or a colossal lead in New Hampshire.
Right.
If he wins Iowa and New Hampshire, can this guy win the nomination of the Democratic Party?
I don't think you can ever say that he couldn't, anybody who wins both Iowa and Hampshire couldn't win. I mean, certainly they could win. I think it's going to be interesting that you could be in a situation after February 9th or whatever the date is, where you could have, the sort of the powers that be in both parties absolutely apoplectic about
Dana, speaking of both parties and apoplectic, whatever that, what's the noun for apoplectic? Whatever it is.
You went to Yale.
Do you not find it fascinating that in a ton of polls, when people who support Donald Trump are asked who their second choice is, you know who their second choice is?
No.
Bernie Sanders. Yeah. And while ideologically they may be in totally different galaxies, they're both playing to an anger. Some in the Democratic Party.
They're playing to the exact same group of people who are dissatisfied, who are feeling bad about this economy, who feel like they can't get ahead. There are just two different remedies to it.
Yeah.
One is, I'm the businessman and I'll solve it for you. The other is, we're going to tear apart certain parts of government and rebuild and go after rich people.
You know, when we started the segment, I don't know if I mentioned all this, but I will again. You know, some people say, even though Hillary Clinton is not even mentioned in this new Benghazi film, that the fact that the issue is front and center because the film is relatively popular is going to hurt her. This disclosure today that some more than top secret documents from her private sector are going to help hurt her, I think this is even worse. Everybody remembers Lena Dunham 2 weeks ago was in New Hampshire. When she was there, she said this.
I've admired Hillary Clinton for many years, 24 to be exact, when I was 6 years old and she entered all of our consciousness.
And one would argue with young women who matter a lot, that's pretty important. Well, it was a very different story than the one the New York Times is telling today. Quoting sources who were at a dinner party with Dunham a few months ago, those sources say Dunham told them she was, quote, disturbed by how in the 90s the Clintons and their allies discredited women who said they had had sexual encounters with or been sexually assaulted by former President Bill Clinton. Had she not been in New Hampshire, I guess you'd say, well, it's a problem. But the fact that she endorsed her big time, and then does this is troubling, is it not?
Well, I mean, I certainly think that there's an off-the-record cocktail party conversation on the one hand, and going out and politically supporting a woman that she thinks will be a very strong president. All of this stuff, anything that's negative, certainly hurts a candidate like Hillary Clinton.
But this is serious negative, is it not, with a real area of vulnerability?
I don't think that it's good news, but I ultimately think that what people are voting on are not 20 and 30-year-old transgressions of Hillary Clinton's husband. I think that women are looking at income equality, what's going to happen to their kids. That's what Hillary has been focusing on.
So here's the good news and the bad news. The good news that my producer said the word is apoplexy. The bad news is there's no time for you to respond. Nice to see you. Good to Shannon, it's great to see you. Next time you'll trouble.
All right,
Thank you so much for your time. Now, time now for tomorrow's Globe tonight. Your first look at Thursday morning's Boston Globe with city editor Steve Smith. Hello there, Steve. What's on your page one tomorrow?
Hello there, Jim. How low can they go? That, of course, is the question many motorists are asking as they pull up to the pump, watching oil prices tumble. But what might be good for motorists can be quite deleterious for the stock market. That is because as investors watch oil company profits plunge, the markets are gyrating wildly. And this may be one of those cases where what is good on Main Street isn't nearly so rosy on Wall Street.
I'm living that, and I'm sure you are too. What else is on page one, Steve?
So go to any community theater production gym, listen to a string quartet, not to mention make your regular visit to the MFA, and you're struck by the panoply of arts options in Boston. That is something that's confirmed in a report being released. It was commissioned by the Boston Foundation, but it also found that compared to 10 other cities, Boston's art scene actually doesn't fare so well when it comes to corporate and foundation support, and in part that's because the three Goliaths of the art scene, if you want to think of it that way, the MFA, the BSO, and yes, WGBH, command some 40% of the donor base, and so that leaves a big pie to be split up by the rest of the arts group.
Steve, thanks so much. We'll see you again tomorrow. Steve Smith from The Globe. Marty Walsh gave his State of the City last night. One line which stood out for me was this.
Violent crime went down by 3%, property crime went down by 10%, all major crime went down by 9%, homicides hit a 16-year low.
They did, but 38 homicides are, of course, still too much for 36 families who lost someone they loved. But it shows a commitment to confronting violence in our city. And if you doubt that, look 1,000 miles to the west, actually to the Wild West, Chirac, as Spike Lee calls it, 488 homicides in Chicago in 2015. Yeah, but Chicago's a lot bigger, Jim, right? And it is. A population 4 times Boston's, but the homicide rate there is 12 times what it is here. Plus, our numbers are going down, theirs are spiking up. And the divide isn't just in how the two cities keep their people safe or don't, but in how they respect them or don't. In Boston, Usama Rahim was killed by the police on June 2nd. The following day, 24 community leaders were shown the video. A day later, it was released to the family. Within a week, released to the public. In Chicago, Laquan McDonald was gunned down by Officer Jason Van Dyke in October of 2014. More than a year later, in response to a Freedom of Information suit, a dashcam video of the shooting was released without audio. The mayor there suggested he'd been kept in the dark, but last week the Chicago Tribune reported this, that despite Emanuel's protestations of ignorance about the shooting of Laquan McDonald, his top staffers were aware of how the 17-year-old black youth was killed and of the videotape of a shooting by a police officer months before the mayor says he found out. Then the same day that story appeared, the city released a video of a separate police shooting, this one from January of 2013, of Cedric Chapman, another black teen, killed running away from a stolen car. Chicago fought the video's release for 3 years, then last week dropped objections to it being made public. A judge dressed down the city for its actions. The Chapman video showed the teen armed with an iPhone, not a gun, and like McDonald, moving away from the police, not toward them, as the officers suggested. So, Boston has work to do. The first 2 years of Marty Walsh and Bill Evans suggest they plan to confront those challenges. In Chicago, all that's clear is that Mayor Rahm Emanuel values his personal survival over that of his constituents. Many of them want Emanuel to step down. One of them, his former employer and friend, Barack Obama, should add his name to that list. What do you think? Email us, tweet us, share your thoughts. That's it for tonight. Please come back tomorrow. Former U.S. Senate leaders, Republican Trent Lott and Democrat Tom Daschle, will be here. Although they were on opposite sides of the aisle, they've come together on a new book, Crisis Point, all about the partisan gridlock in Washington and their prescription to overcome it. That and more tomorrow at 7. One more thing before we go. Today, I'm sure you know this, January 20 is National Penguin Awareness Day, so we leave you with some images to mark the occasion.